Yeah. Hello everyone. Welcome to this event that we're having online to launch N.Prabhakaran's new novel in English. It's called Theeyoor Chronicles, and it's been translated by Jayasree Kalathil. Uh, N.Prabhakaran is, of course, one of the most important novelists writing in Malayalam at the moment, important writers writing in Malayalam at the moment. He's written in a variety of genres, whether it's poetry, short stories, novels, travelogues, nonfiction, you name it. And he's won pretty much every award under the sun. Um, HarperCollins had published a collection of his long stories called Diary of a Malayali Madman a few years ago, also translated by Jayasree Kalathil. And that happened to win the Crossword Book Award. And we have it here, Mr. Prabhakaran, of course, and we have Jayasree Kalathil herself as a translator. Incidentally, she won the JCB award last year as well for her translation of S. Harish's Mustache. And speaking to the two of them, we will have Arunava Sinha, who needs no introduction among readers. He's translated, I think, some 60 books from the Bengali to English. Most recently, Anita Agrihotri's The Sickle. And yeah, I will leave it to the three of them, three of my favorite literary people, to speak about Theeyoor Chronicles, which you can also buy. I believe there's a link that's been shared.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
so over to the
Rahul.
three of
Thanks
you.
very much. And good evening, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here with Mr. Prabhakaran and Jayasree. And the thing about writers and translators is that when you read their books, you feel they're old friends, even if you've never actually met them. So, thanks to Jayasree, I've read two of N. Prabhakaran's books. I was always hoping that there would be an opportunity to actually meet you, sir, and talk to you. So I'm very pleased to be able to chat with both of you over Theeyoor Chronicles. I want to plunge in right away, Mr. Prabhakaran, by asking you about the form that you chose for this book. Do you call it fiction? Does it lie somewhere in that gray area between actual events and then how a writer takes them and shapes them with his own imagination to turn it into something else? How would you describe this book? And maybe in that context, you could also tell us how you got into this book, what your journey with it has been like.
ഇത് ഫിക്ഷൻ തന്നെയാണ്. ആക്ച്വൽ ഇൻസിഡൻസിന് ഓരോന്നിനും അതിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്ത് അങ്ങനെ എഴുതിയതല്ല അത്. പക്ഷേ അതിൻ്റെ ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ടിൽ കുറച്ച് ഇതിലേക്ക് നയിക്കുന്ന കുറേ there are certain incidents leading to this writing. ഞാൻ താമസിക്കുന്ന ഗ്രാമം, it's a suicide village. Once it was known as a suicide village. And there were some other suicide villages also in Kerala, identified as suicide villages. It was years back, some 20-25 years back. ഇപ്പോൾ അതിൻ്റെ സിറ്റുവേഷനൊക്കെ മാറിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു സാഹചര്യത്തിലാണ് ഞാൻ ഇതിലേക്ക് വന്നത്. പക്ഷേ ഇതൊരു ഫിക്ഷൻ തന്നെയാണ്. അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഹിസ്റ്ററിയുടെയോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റിയൽ ഇൻസിഡൻസിൻ്റെയോ ഒരു നേർപകർപ്പോ അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു എൻലാർജ്മെൻറ്റോ അതിൻ്റെ എന്തെങ്കിലും തരത്തിലൊരു ഡീവിയേഷനോ മാത്രമല്ല. ഇറ്റ്സ് എ ഫിക്ഷൻ.
Arunava, do you want me to translate? Although
Yes,
Masha
please.
spoke in, okay.
Yes.
So essentially, that it is fiction. It is not based on actual events, but there are certain incidents that have led to the writing of the book. The village where Prabhakaran Masha lives used to be known as a suicide village, and there are other villages in Kerala also that have been called by that epithet, although things are different now. So it is to kind of explore what that means is when he started writing, what brought him to writing the book. So it is, it's not a, it's not only or true copy or enlargement of historical events. It is fiction. It is, but certain incidents have led to him thinking about them.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to you, Jayasree. What was your first reaction when you read the book? What did what went through your mind? And were you reading it because you knew we were going to translate it, or were you reading it just as a reader?
Um, my first reaction, because I hadn't actually read Theeyoor Chronicles, the original was published in the late 1980s or 99, I think it was. But I hadn't read the book. And to me, after reading and translating some of Prabhakaran Maharsh's longer stories, it quite amazed me to think that this novel has not been translated yet, because there's been several translations from Malayalam literature into English over the many years. But this is, I would call, a masterpiece in Malayalam literature. And for me, it was very surprising to see that this book has not been translated. Partly, I was happy because that gave me a chance to translate it. But the novel, it's very different, even from Prabhakaran sir's own other writings, I think. Not just in terms of what we just discussed, in terms of whether it is fiction or docu-fiction or history, etc. But it's a quietly told story, and there are like lives of characters which are full of incidents, but even that story is said in that very quiet tone. I think that really attracted me to the book, to be able to try and kind of convey that in English. I think that was quite interesting as a translator to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Prabhakaran. So you mentioned the fact that these are the suicide, these spots, and suicide itself is it's I mean, it goes without saying that it's a very troubling affair, but it leads us to think about things in a much larger context, not only as an individual tragedy or a private tragedy, but also in terms of the forces leading up to it and in terms of what happens afterwards. So, what were the questions that arose in your mind when you decided that you were going to write a novel with this theme?
As you have said, um, the suicide of individuals. In fact, it has got a social dimension, or it's part of a social reality. There are so many other issues, social issues, that lead an individual to suicide. I think if the society is mentally or psychologically robust, healthy, any individual can survive there. But the fact is that our society is not that much healthy. Often people fail to understand those who take a direction different from that generally people choose. If the way is a little bit different, if they take a deviation from the norm, people usually fail to understand them, and they are marginalized, they are ridiculed, they are criticized, and this may create a lot of problems, a total breakdown to those who are very meek. I personally know such persons, and I have some heartbreaking incidents in my own life. In the close circle, or in the circle of close relatives, I know how they suffered and what led them to stop living. And this is a social reality. Though an individual commits suicide, there is a society, and I hope that I may be able to do a little bit, only a very little, to improve the general standard of this mental sphere of our society. That's what I am trying for. This is what I have to say.
So, thank you. So, you're saying that writing a novel like this also has a certain non-literary objective.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course.
And would you
Literature,
say, sorry, go on.
yeah. Tell me.
No, I was asking whether you think that is the case with everything that you write.
I don't actually begin writing a fiction with this purpose in mind. But I found that when my work is presented to the people, or when the people receive them, it makes such small changes, maybe very meager, in their lives or in their understanding of others. That's what I have seen. And slowly I understood that my writing has such an effect. People from various parts of the state, those are from various areas of living, often call me and communicate their feelings. Then it gave me a chance to understand. It gave me an opportunity to understand what is the result of my writing. And I am very happy with it. And I think I can continue in this way.
What are your own views on using the material that you get when you learn about people and their lives? And as you said, very often maybe they might be talking to you, telling you a lot. What is your view on using all of this in your fiction? Do you feel you need to use it as it is for authenticity and rawness, or do you think uh, craft of fiction needs to come over it, change it in some ways, protect their privacy, and so on?
I I choose characters from real life, but I make all the necessary changes, all the relevant changes in the real incidents. And even if those people who are made characters cannot identify themselves in my writing, I might have made that much changes. But I know each and every individual represents, knowingly or unknowingly, some trends or some political or social realities in our life. They represent, maybe unknowingly. And I think I had to give an artistic I have to use my creative energy to make it a more powerful reality, more powerful than what they really exhibit in their life. I think that that is what I am doing.
Do you want to just unpack that word powerful a little bit? What do you mean by a more powerful reality?
A powerful reality means when an individual unknowingly represents a social force or a social trend, and when I make him a character, that very same trend or the tendency or that social reality is given a more powerful form or a more powerful uh, atmosphere, it is made a more powerful reality because that fictional element makes it more powerful.
Yes, thank you. I'll turn.
Often that
Sorry,
happens.
yes, go on, please, Mr.
Yeah, that's
Prabhakaran. Did
what
you
I
want
am
to?
doing.
Okay, okay, thank you. Jayashree, I want to ask you now. as you were translating this book and as you were reading it, what to you were the truths of this book that you had to convey through your translation? The intangible truths, as it were, uh, the things that perhaps only a translator gets when they're putting it in a different language.
Oh, that's a difficult question, isn't it? Um, I think, like every reader, in the beginning, the translator also interacts with the book as anybody would do, with the story, with the content, So initially, that is what you are engaging with, and you're reading it like any other reader. With Theeyoor Chronicles, for me, in the previous book there is a long story called Invisible Forests that Prabharamash had written, and that is told from the point of view of a woman. It has a woman protagonist, and it is pretty similar to this story in the sense that that story is also talking about the suicide village, and there's a journalist in it who is actually writing about the suicide village, and there's lots of suicides happening, etc. So when you read Theeyoor Chronicles, I think initially I was also kind of trying to see that this story is told from a very different point of view from that long novel, and also this story has so much more than what was in that novella earlier. So there's a tone difference, which I found very interesting while rereading and reading again Theeyoor Chronicles, because I think Prabhakaran Mash is writing or telling this story from a different position from what he did with Invisible Forests.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, then it was also, like trying to capture that, what is it that is happening in this book? So this book is about suicides and disappearances in this village called Theeyoor and the villages surrounding it. But it's much more than that as well, because it's about ultimately it's about people's lives, not deaths, and how the way you quietly and carefully say that story, which is kind of exploring what happened to different people, etc., but eventually it is about the triumph of life. um, Probably triumph is the wrong word to use here. It is about the survival of life against all odds, as it were, given the societies we live in. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that as a translator, you're still engaging from from a position of engaging with the story and the content. But the other bit that a translator does is about the tone of voice and the kind of small things that the author does, the certain repetitions that might be there not words, but the kind of a mood, as it were. So capturing that mood, that repetition of that mood, because for example, in the book, there are lots of people who are very lonely in their being. What is the essence of that loneliness? So it's at a different realm from engaging with the story. So I think that's what you're trying to carefully understand, so that when you choose words, put together sentences in a different language, you don't lose those moods, as it were.
Yes, that's what I was talking about. And I'm increasingly fascinated by the fact that the large number or a substantial number of very high quality translations from the non-English languages of India are creating a new literature in English in India. And that new literature in English is so very different from the books that are written in English to begin with, that what used to be on the periphery is now occupying the center, and we realize that these are the books that really are the various literatures of India. So what are your expectations from this book now that it has got a life in English? In
Um,
fact, I'll ask both of you this question.
I remember sending the manuscript to Prabhakaran Masha, and he emailed me after he read that to say that it almost felt like reading a new book, in English,
Yeah.
because there is a 21-year gap between the original and the English version, but there is also so many other differences in terms of how the same story can be told in a different language, etc. So that was really positive for me, because it's the same story, but if it still feels fresh in English now, and then that something has happened that is actually working in the translation. But also, going back to your point about what is happening to regional language translations currently, I'm not sure about this, but I have a kind of small viewpoint that is beginning to develop. Is that I think there was earlier an effort to somehow universalize the text, so you use English, or even if it is Indian English, this idea that this is how Indian English is written, and regardless of whether the story is from Malayalam, Tamil, Bangla, or Kannada, or also different by totally different writers from the same language. I think there was an effort to kind of make it make nice with it, so that everybody gets a kind of universal version of it. I think a lot of current translators are not doing that. I think they don't feel the need to universalize the language. And I think a lot of us are trying to be more faithful, be more loyal to the author's use of language, or the author's way of telling a story, etc., rather than worrying too much about whether is this a universal English that I'll be using, even if it is a universal Indian English that I'll be using. That may have something to do with it. I don't know. This is just a hunch that I have.
Yes, no, of course, absolutely. And I think the books being chosen are also no longer being picked for their affinity to that universal experience, but for their deviance from it. There was a time when there would be this question, will this book travel into the English language? And now I think the question is, let's hope the answer to that is no, because only then is it really worth taking into the English language? Otherwise, just read a book in English. Why bother? What are your views, Mr. Prabhakaran, on, especially this is a very interesting point, when you read your own book in a different language 21 years after it was written, and you yourself have evolved as a writer since then. So what was it like?
Yes, Jayasree said, when I read the translation, I felt that I was actually reading a new book, though it was written by me 21 years back. It was that much fresh. The translation was that much beautiful, that much creative, that much fresh. And I was very much satisfied. I had only a very few suggestions regarding some place names and such other things. Only a very few suggestions. Everything was done very beautifully. And I think I have to add a point, just one thing. When you translate a book into English, when the readers go through these things, from regional languages, when a work of fiction comes to English, people get a chance to see the characters with the specific features of their culture, the specific features of their society. They can watch them, they can see them closely without any alterations. They are not made universal human beings. The readers can see them as individuals coming from specific particular cultures. Recently, a few days back, I read the famous speech made by Dostoevsky on Pushkin. And about Pushkin, he says that the quality of Pushkin's writing was that Pushkin could portray characters from different cultures without making any alterations, without bringing without making them Russian. When Pushkin created a character belonging to Italian culture, he was an Italian. When he wrote about someone from Spain, the Spanish culture was there. He could maintain, he could keep it there. In this case, Dostoevsky said that Pushkin was greater than Shakespeare. When Shakespeare wrote about an Italian, Italian came to Shakespeare's work, Shakespeare made him an Englishman, unknowingly maybe, but Pushkin didn't do that. So Pushkin was greater. That was Dostoevsky's observation. And I found it very interesting. Maybe it may be debatable. In the case of Shakespeare, was it so? It's a debatable question, but I found it very interesting. And when a book from Malayalam comes to English, those people the readers from different parts of the country, from different parts of the world, can see who a Malayali is, what are the specific particular problems of a Malayali, how his mental life is different from those living in Bengal or in other parts of the country. That's the positive thing about coming books from regional languages, and I think it's a welcome move. It has created a sphere, a new sphere of literature, a new area of literature. That's what I think.
Yes, thank you. And I think Jayashree and I have a new role model now. Pushkin the way Dostoevsky saw him. Because this, what you have just told us, is also the principle of translation, so that we don't flatten the differences between the characters. Mm.
Yeah,
I, contemporary literatures of India are, of course, very vibrant, but even so, I find the literature that's been written in Kerala, in Malayalam, is a force of nature. I mean, it is undoubtedly the best contemporary writing in India right now. And why do you think this is possible? Why has it happened? I mean, the other vibrant literatures earlier, like Bengali and Hindi, and even I would say Marathi and Tamil, they have not kept pace. Malayalam, what's being written in Malayalam is incredible. How do you think this has happened?
I think the Malayali society has a vibrant mental life, their politics, their culture, and even the common man discusses, earnestly discusses every political issues and cultural issues. They have small groups. During these COVID days, I know there were hundreds of online meetings. And I myself have participated in more than 50 online meetings. They were all literary meetings, cultural meetings, and other things. People are that much interested in literature, culture, and social issues. And that makes the Malayali life vibrant. And recently, during the last 2-3 decades, it has weakened a little bit. That power has weakened a little bit. Before that, uh, all the great literary works in the world were presented in Malayalam before
Hmm.
the common mass in the form of Kathaprasangam. That there was a form, Kathaprasangam. Kathaprasangam means telling stories in the form of speeches. We had such great people like Sambashivan. He presented all the plays of Shakespeare in the form of Kathaprasangam. And even the great novel Karamsov Brothers was presented before the common man
Hmm.
in the form of Kathaprasangam. It's a great thing. I don't think it might not have, I don't think that it has happened in other parts of the country.
No,
And
it
we
has
have
not.
here, yeah. And here we have here we have a Kerala Library Council,
Hmm.
in which more than 80,132 libraries have got affiliation. It is such a huge movement, Kerala Library Council. And I think in no other parts of the country there is such a movement, such a big movement. There may be libraries, there may be groups of such organizations may be there, but this is a great thing. More than 8,132 libraries under one banner, Kerala Library Council. And people make use of all these libraries. And we have a very good readership here for almost all the writers, from above average writers. Everyone can sell his or her books 2,000 copies very easily. This may not be possible in other parts of the country. That's what I have
Hmm.
heard.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. So for a great literature, you need great readers to begin with. begin with.
Yeah, of course, of course. There should be a great reading public, and we have it in Kerala.
All right, thank you. I'll move to some questions that are being asked. Is my voice echoing somewhere?
No, no, no. It's clearly audible for me.
Okay, I can hear an echo. All right, thank you. Mm, So I'll ask you two questions that two separate people have asked. One says, what made you think of turning journalism into fiction? And the other asks, how did you create these specific characters in this novel?
Pardon?
The first question was, what made you think of turning journalism into literature? And the second question, related question, is how did you come up with the characters whom you have placed in this novel?
Regarding the first question, and I don't know why I felt that I should alienate myself a little bit from the plot of the story. That happens. That often happens. And I don't compare myself with Dostoevsky, but even in Karamazov Brothers, Dostoevsky had written a small preface, and he had placed an author in it who is not Dostoevsky. That happens because a writer feels more freedom when he gets a little bit alienated from the plot.
Hmm.
It might be for that I have used this journalist. I began the novel in that way. It might be because of that. I I didn't do it after making a clear cut plan. It just happened. But I think that may be the reason. And about other characters, the question was not clear.
And
About the
how did you create these particular characters?
these characters, my practice is that in the case of writing novels, I move to the people. I find them from life. For example, there's another novel by me, Janagatha. It has got 22 major characters. All these 22 characters are living characters. And I myself had met them and talked to them, and I know every minute details of their life. But I made so many changes. As I had already said, I made so many changes so that they couldn't identify that they are made these characters. They are made into. They are made. It is from them I had made these characters. They couldn't. They won't be able to understand.
Hmm.
But they are real living beings. I had met them, and just like that, these all the characters in this novel also are there as real human beings. I know them personally, and that's my way of writing.
Thank you. In fact, I'm really reminded of what Gabriel Garcia Marquez said when he said all his fiction comes out of his journalism. That all these things have happened, and he knows all the people, and yet people ask him, "But you write in this magical fantasy, magical realism form." So, and he said it's all absolute reality.
That
So one more
happens.
question. So, question for you, Jayasree, which is that in this particular book, so when you're talking about taking it into was there any one particular thing in the Malayalam version that you found especially challenging when taking into English?
Not just in this book. I think as a translator, it is when the first of all, Theeyoor Chronicles is, it's not like a Kerala novel. It's a local regional novel of northern Kerala and a northern Kerala history, politics, and the life in certain villages in that area. So there's already a certain deeper view into a smaller context, I think. So there's lots of use of language, for example, or especially in terms of idioms or metaphors, which may not lend I mean, you can try and translate it into English, which then wouldn't make any sense, or at least, in Malayalam, where it would have meant something, in English it will just ridiculous. It looks ridiculous. So there are certain things that then you invent something different that works in English. So it may not be necessarily exactly as it was in Malayalam. So I think as a translator, my initial what I do initially is to stubbornly try and make it work. Yeah, and until a point comes, then I have to tell myself that it's not going to work and you need to do something different. So I think there are several places like that where you encounter such points in the book where you need to kind of make a call as to whether you're going to try and make something fit into English, or you kind of work with it more loosely and creatively to see that the mood and the meaning is transferred, although it may not be the exact way in which it was said in Malayalam. So mostly in translation, the difficult bits are that, in terms of trying, especially when books are not broad canvas, when books are kind of very local, very regional. I think that's the case.
Thank you. Before we end, we are almost at the end of our time, but I'm going to ask you a quick question, both of you. Very simple question. What are you working on right now? Jayasree, what are you translating now?
I am sticking with the very regional storytelling that is happening in Kerala brilliantly at the moment. Rather than a Malayali story, it is more very regional. So I am actually working on translating a book by Sheila Tommy, which is a story set in Wayanad, which is the northernmost part of Kerala, and it kind of talks about migrant lives, because people from the plains have migrated into the forests and changed it into coffee plantations and all these beautiful spices, etc. So it's the story of migration from the 1970s onwards. So that's the book I'm working on right now.
And Mr. Prabhakaran, are you writing a new novel?
Yeah, I have certain plans. In fact, I have some 2 or 3 novels. I have begun them, and among them, one is the most important thing for me. It's based on the life of a folk hero. Once I wrote a small novel. The title is Ezhunumide. Ezhunumide means beyond 7. Beyond 7 means above the hill. A man moving from the plain land to the hill area. That's the story. It's the story of a folk god. And I have to rewrite it, because when I wrote it, it was a small novel. And then after years, I felt that I should rewrite it. I should make it a big. So I should give it an epic dimension, and I have been working on it for several years. And perhaps I may be able to complete it. That's what I hope. And I have other novels also with me.
No, we need your novels, so you're certainly going to have to complete them. Thank
Okay,
you
thank
very
you.
much. Thank you, Mr. Prabhakaran. Thank you, Jayasree. Thank you,
Thank you.
Crossword. And please remember to buy the book. The link is available on where you're watching. So please click on it and buy the book and read it, because you're not going to stop till you get to the end. That's for sure. Thank you once again, everyone.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.